Well, hey there, folks. It's Mr. B here. So what I'm doing now is I'm starting something called the Photoshop Classroom in a Book tutorial series. This series is extremely useful for anybody who wants to learn Photoshop, get a lot better with the tools, and it's really designed to take you through a series of tutorials. And what we're doing when we learn Photoshop is we'll do something called spiral learning, where you just learn one or two tools here and there, and then you spiral outwards. When you open up Photoshop, which I have down here, you will see that it can be quite a lot to take in. You have a pretty incredible interface with tools over here. These things over here are called palettes. And there's so much kind of take in all at once. You sort of wonder, well, where do I even start? Well, we'll start with projects and we'll build skill. So let's launch into project number 1 right away here. And I'm just going to open that up. These projects at our school are sitting on our server on the assignment drive. And in the assignment drive, you have to go to the information technology folder that's appropriate. So cruise on over to the ICT folder. There's a couple of them. If you're taking computer arts, it'll be ICTC. Or if you're taking the modular course, where you're doing programming and arts and a whole bunch of things, cruise on over to ICTX. Inside of that folder, for example, ICTX, you'll find a Photoshop folder, and all of these tutorials are in there. Of course, we'll have links to YouTube. The reason the YouTube portion has been put in place now is it enables me to run you through the tutorials, but to also be present as the teacher to spot help people that need it, right? So the instruction, right, opens up a little bit more, freeing the instructor to not just be a demonstrator, but just to be right alongside you for whatever you need. So I've clicked on chapter 1, and there's 3 projects in there. So I'm looking at the first project, and this is it. Now, when you open up Photoshop, few things you have to know. First of all, your tools will likely look like this, and over here, your palettes will look like this. Photoshop has something called a workspace. It's kind of where everything is. Now, when it comes to that workspace, you can customize some things. You have to get comfortable. First thing I do is I go like this. It brings all my tools kind of together in sort of a 2 columns. Works better for me. When you look at the tools, what you have to realize is those little triangles right there, right? What those triangles are trying to tell you is that there is more than one tool in there. So for example, this is called the eyedropper. It's a color selection tool, but these are variations of that tool. When you go here, just hold down for a second, you will see variations of selection. So this one selects colors. So you've got the magic wand tool hiding underneath there. This is one you'll use quite a bit. This is for selecting regions, and these are for selecting pixels. So different kind of shapes to do that. As I say, each one of these tutorials takes you into these tools. So let's zoom out a little bit here. You'll notice as you cruise over a particular tool, it'll say what it is, like as a tooltip, but then it'll show you a letter. So when you are over top of the Move tool, it'll say if you want the Move tool, just hit the letter V, which I just did, and now the Move tool is up. Each one of these tools, when selected, has characteristics. So when I selected the Move tool, you'll see this Properties menu is the one for the Move tool. And when I select the Marquee tool, this is some characteristics about how you do marquees. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. Not too bad. If the workspace is something you want to customize, you can go to the menu, and there's a menu for everything. And right here under Window, you'll see Workspace, and you can change it. I've got a friend in photography, and over here you'll see tools that are really associated with this. And the friend of mine uses this sort of layout a lot more. Navigator, for example, has some really built-in benefits for zooming in and zooming out, which we'll talk about during this tutorial. Over here, these palettes are basically like little menus. They give you abilities to alter your work or to zoom in on your work or whatever you want to do. Everything has a menu. So when you come over here, you'll notice there's a little drop menu there, and it has to do with the navigator. You click on histogram, which is the colors in your work, you'll see that it has its own little drop menu, and so on and so forth. So each one of these has a menu. Layers has a menu that has everything to do with layers. So you're sort of getting the idea. So in this first tutorial, what I want to do is show you the workspace with the tools, the menu, properties here, palettes over here, and just get you comfortable with sort of zooming around the space. By opening up this project, this sort of rural school setting project, what we'll do is we'll use our first tool, which is the selection tool. In this case, we're not going to use the rectangular one. This is normally default. The one that we want, is hiding out in there, is the circular shaped one. So what I want to do is I want to highlight this little boy right here. Maybe this is your uncle, you're doing some work, trying to identify, and we're going to highlight him so that he stands out from the rest of the students. So when I chose the elliptical marquee tool, I did a little drag like this over his face. Okay. Now if you hold down the spacebar while you've got your mouse pressed, you can actually move the whole thing, right, before you're done resizing it. So that's actually really cool. Holding the spacebar down lets me resize it, because when you're just working like this, all you can do is make this bigger or smaller, but when you hold down Shift, you can, I should say, relocate it. There you go. Now when you zoom in on this, what you'll see are what are called the marching ants. It looks like ants are all moving around in sort of like a little circle. It's just an animation for the selection tool, and it's quite useful. So now that he's highlighted, something you need to know. I have said that these pixels in this region are something I'm interested in. What do I mean by pixels? Okay, let's zoom in. I'm going to hold down, there's lots of ways to zoom in. Okay, I'm going to hold down on my Mac, my command, and I'm going to hit the plus key, and I can zoom in like this. And you see that the image is actually made up of all these little color bits. Okay, those are pixels. And with high resolution images or high resolution TVs, you've got lots of pixels. The more pixels you have, the more kind of work you can do before it gets blurry. So this is a pretty good image, right? With modern cameras, you can use 12, 18 megapixels, and that takes in a huge amount. This picture and everything we're kind of doing in Photoshop at this point is what we call a bitmap. You've probably heard of JPEGs or PNGs or GIFs and things like that. What they are is they're bits of color that are mapped into a grid. So we say it's a bitmap. So it kind of makes sense. And yes, I pronounce it GIF, not GIF. That photo format is the graphics interchange format. So graphics starts with a G, so I'm going to call it GIF, not GIF, because graphic doesn't start with a J. Otherwise, it would be the JAFX interchange format. Anyway, let's alter this little boy here. And I'm going to grab the Move tool and show you what happens when you have pixels selected. You might notice right now that it looks like scissors have suddenly appeared over top of his face. What it means is when you go to move something, you're literally cutting it. So there you go. And now you're seeing the white background. So this is a little frightening, so we'll put it back. You can undo anything in Photoshop. If you make a mistake, right, just hit Control Z on a PC or Command Z on your Mac. Okay, so that's fixed, no big deal. Okay, so what do you really want to do here? I want to make him stand out. So I need to make this lighter, or here's a thought. How about I make everybody else darker? Now watch. This is kind of interesting. I've got him selected, but what about everything outside the circle? This is a neat choice. It's called the inverse. So the inverse of you is everybody else. Okay. So when you go up to your select tools, right here, you see you could say select all, and see what it did. It went around everybody. I'm going to undo that. Right now, I'm interested in selecting this person. Okay. I'm going to change that selection now to not just him, but the inverse, which is everybody else. Now watch. When I do this, you'll see not only his selection, but the outer selection. So if I move this, you'll see what I have. Oh, I've got everything else. Okay. So now, if all of this outside of his face is selected, because I used that inverse choice under the selection menu, then I can have a little bit of fun with this. Okay, so what do I want to do? Well, what I want to do is I want to mess around with sort of the lighting, okay? And by messing around with the lighting, what I want to do is I'm going to, just a second here, image adjustments, there we go. I am going to mess around with what's called the lighting curves. So the lighting curves are right here, so I'll just kind of leave this up so you can navigate to it as well. And there's a whole bunch of things you can do. I could change the colors, I could mess around with the blacks and the whites, I could invert the colors here. So I want to mess with the lighting levels. Okay, so you get this crazy looking sort of window pops up, and it's looking at the range of the colors. That's what this is here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this on the end, because this is sort of the extreme, and I'm going to pull it down. You can sort of see what that does. It's darkening the image, right? So I'm saying I don't want it to be lighter. That's up here, right? I want to sort of darken it. So I'll pull it down here, and you can see that I'm making the background too dark. So in Photoshop, kind of want to be tasteful. You want to make little adjustments, not necessarily overdo it. I know that's subjective. I'm affecting all the colors right now. When you get more advanced, you can affect different ranges of colors. When you're looking at a screen, you're looking at the combination of red, green, and blue light. Okay, so that makes up all the colors. So what I'm doing right now is I'm affecting them all by pulling down on this, which is darkening the background. Just go like that. And you want to have your preview button on so you can see what's going on live. If you don't, a little bit harder to see. So I'm going to say, all right. And looks pretty good. Not too bad. So I'm going to deselect. Now, I have to let go of my selections because I'm more or less done. So when you go to select, you'll see this here, right? But you could hit Control D, okay, or Command D on a Mac, and there you go. Your work's done. If you wanted to go back through your work because you thought, oh, you know, I've deselected, how do I go back? Because if I hit Command Z, I can't go back more than one step. So that's frustrating. Here is a superpower. You go to Windows, and you slide on down to the History palette. And when you open that up, it is precisely what you thought it was. It's a history palette, think of it as a menu, where you can slide back through all of your steps. And I'll zoom back out so you can see that, right? All the way back to when you open the file, or all the way forward to where you're working. Here's something not a lot of people, it's not that they don't know it, it's just that they don't do it. You can create what are called snapshots right here. So these are like little save points where you can save your work. So I've got a snapshot there like a moment in time, and I'll call it phase 1, like that. That's really useful because if you ever mess up your file, this is now a part of your file. So you could go back in time to certain moments in your work. And as I say, that's a superpower. You want that because if you're ever really far into a project and you mess it up, you want to be able to come back. So, one more thing to show you is zooming, and then I promise I'm done. But the first tutorial could be a little longer because it's the first time you've seen anything. If you want to zoom in, you can hit Control plus and Control minus. I kind of like that. That suits me. If you've got the navigator window open, if you don't have it, right, it's here. You can zoom in and out that way. Okay, so that's fine. Pretty cool. There's another tool over here, and I'll let the tooltip come. It's called the Zoom tool, or Z on the keyboard. Now when you've got this, you can zoom in and out holding your mouse button, right? Or you can click your way in. But once you're clicked in, you're wondering, how do I get out? So hold down Alt on a PC, and it's Option on the Mac. So I'm actually using the Alt key too. And you'll see that that selection tool became a minus instead of a plus. So when I let it up, it's plus, and when it's down, it's minus. That's another way to zoom. So the thing about Photoshop is it has like 50 million ways to do the same thing. I like my hyperbole, it's good. This has been an introduction, folks, to the basics of Photoshop, and hoorah, we just highlighted, call him your grandpa, your uncle, that cute little kid is highlighted. You've learned quite a few things. In one tutorial, you've learned about this tool, the Marquee tool for selecting things, putting marquees around them. You've learned about the Move tool. You've learned how to zoom in and out, so the Zoom tool. And you've learned about your Workspace and how to change things, calling it what you want, through the Windows menu up here. So once you do this, you've actually picked up a lot of skills. So thanks for hanging in there, and it's been fun. Ciao.